Hello and welcome to Theory of Obscurity. I'm Chriddof.
And I'm Applemask.
And in this podcast, we delve into what popular culture has either forgotten or ignored. Media such as movies, books, TV shows, records, and anything else that we can send to each other as a YouTube link or a digital file. So once again, we've chosen two things for each other. There's an animated film I sent to Applemask, and he sent me a educational film. But we'll go with Applemask's first. The film in question is I believe it's a 1984 film, or a 1983 or 85. It's the date on IMDb is sort of a bit all over the place. But yeah, it's Katy Caterpillar, or Katy the Caterpillar, or something like that. I always used to refer to it as the latter as a kid.
Katy la Oruga, I think it is in the original.
Right, okay.
Spanish, because it's a Mexican film.
Yeah. So I was obsessed with this film as a very young child, and I got it out on VHS again and again because there was an English dub of it released primarily for the US market, but it got released over here as well, and it seems to have been very obscure. But yeah, I still actually to this date I haven't actually properly watched it back, even though I do have a copy of it, a snaffle of YouTube. But yeah, I'm wondering what you thought of it, really.
Yeah, I read your account of this being one of those films that was always at the VHS rental store that you always got out. I had one of those too. I didn't have a film I was obsessed by from the VHS store, but I do recognise the form of this sort of obscure thing that wouldn't show up anywhere else. In my case, it was the Enchanted Forest, a Czech animated film that we got out occasionally and never saw in any other context except for rental.
Yes, my sister actually also saw that exact same film, The Enchanted Forest. In fact, she did suggest it to me for a thing I could send to you, but I suppose that doesn't quite count anymore now I've learned that.
Yeah. Let's put the knockers on that.
Yeah.
It's a Mexican-Spanish co-production, apparently. The only Mexican kids film I was previously aware of was that Santa Claus film from 1959 odd.
Yeah, Santa Claus versus the Martians, or whatever it's called.
No, that one was just American.
Oh yeah, okay. I think I'm mixing it up because there's two things of it. One was on MST3K, wasn't it?
They both were.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, yes, but I do
one
now. Sorry.
Yeah, one was Joel and the other was Mike.
Yeah, okay, yes, I do know. Now, yes.
Yeah, it's a bit hard because it's just called Santa Claus, the Mexican one. So I refer to it as Santa Claus versus the Mexicans, just to distinguish. Anyway, Katy Caterpillar isn't anything like as weird as that, but it does have similarly stilted dubbing, enough that I found myself wondering what the pace of the dialogue would be like in the original Spanish. It feels like it might have been translated over literally in places, like word for word, whether it actually works in English sentence structure wise or not.
Right.
The voice cast comes from every cheap American cartoon TVAM ever showed. The title character, Katy Caterpillar, is voiced by Barbara Goodson, who also did the voice of Rita Repulsa on Power Rangers, and Red the Fraggle. And she's a very good voice actress, but unfortunately she uses an incredibly grating baby voice for Katy that gets more and more irritating as the film goes along.
Right, okay.
And isn't helped when she meets up with a bee who turns out to have the exact same voice but higher.
Okay, I don't remember that for some reason, but yeah.
She got sisters with New Jersey accents for some reason. And sort of the main antagonists are a pair of crows who talk in slow motion Dick Van Dyke voices, only slightly worse. The whole thing is a caterpillar butterfly self-actualization metaphor, which is really, really pounded home. That she goes off to find herself and find what she's going to be, because she's a caterpillar and obviously she's going to be a butterfly. So the metaphor is not exactly left for the kids to decipher. It's got a pleasant vaporwave sound. I was pleasantly surprised actually by the soundtrack, because this is from the mid-80s, and kids' films from the mid-80s tended to have relentless soundtracks, especially foreign language ones from outside of the English-speaking world, like the Magic Voyage, or that Felix the Cat film, or the show Galaxy High, which I used to watch on TBAM. I quite liked that show. I liked it at the time, and I still think it's pretty good, but watching it back now, I never realised the music is always playing. Always, every second. It never shuts the fuck up. And that is a feature of a lot of animation from the 80s, but Katy Caterpillar's soundtrack actually shuts up occasionally. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. The structure of the first half of the film is basically episodic, what I call a Tigger quest, because it's structured kind of like the A.A. Milne story that introduced Tigger, and he had to try and figure out what he eats. And he went around everybody's house and tried what they had, and he was always very confident that was great and that was what he was going to have, and then it turned out to have a single fatal flaw, and he had to move on. And the first half of this film has basically the same structure. She wanders through nature, meeting new animals she could ostensibly become, like a spider and some chameleons and some bees. And they all initially seem tempting, but turn out to have a flaw that rules them out as a permanent vocation, so she moves on to the next one. The spiders make lovely webs, but turn out to be off-puttingly carnivorous. Chameleons are fun, but they're elitist dicks. Bees are totalitarian communists. And frogs, judging by the one frog we meet, are amoral capitalists. So at least she gets to learn how both systems suck. She gets to learn how communism and capitalism are both basically terrible. So that's good. And then she meets a redneck mouse, and the second half of the film is more of a single story. She and the redneck mouse travel to the city and have misadventures, mostly involving how mankind is rubbish. And then she goes back home and inevitably becomes a butterfly.
Yeah.
You know, spoiler alert.
Yes. Yeah, I seem to remember from my vague memories, because as I say, I have not rewatched the video file, even though I have it, but I seem to remember at the end there's some big long sequence with like a paint factory or something, and a cat or an evil cat.
Yeah, there's an evil cat that's trying to eat the mouse. He teams up with the crows who are trying to eat the caterpillar. And there's a big chase sequence in a factory. I don't think it's a paint factory. I think it's a canned goods factory.
Okay, yes, yeah.
They almost get canned.
Yeah, it's been literally decades since I saw it, of course.
Particularly the city bit, particularly the second half in the city, genuinely raises some interesting questions about the relationship between humans and animals, and by that token about class structure itself. Although it doesn't answer any of them, or you draw that much attention to them. It might all just be a complete accident, to be honest. And there's the usual ruminations about whether or not mankind are bastards, which we are.
Yeah.
And something for the insectoid branch of the furry fandom at the end, as Katy becomes a butterfly with an hourglass figure, which is actually commented on. It's actually commented on by one of her sisters, the one who's always eating. So, potential to trigger eating disorders in the little girls in the audience.
Yes. So that's Katy Caterpillar, or Katy the Caterpillar, as I insisted on calling it at 5, and IMDb.
It should have a "the."
Yeah, I know. It just because it's from of course, different language, of course. Would you
Well,
recommend?
it does have the article in the Spanish. It's Katy la oruga.
Ah, okay.
So
Yeah, that's a bit weird. Okay, but would you recommend this to anybody today?
I wouldn't recommend going out of your way to see it or anything.
Mm.
But you could, if you got small children, you could do a lot worse. It's not particularly good, but it's not horribly bad or anything.
Right. Yes. So let's move on to the second thing. What Applemask sent to me. It's a short 15-minute educational VHS thing made around about, I'm not sure of the date, but it must have been around about the very late 80s and very early 90s. I don't know if you know the precise year yourself.
1989, I believe.
Right, okay, yeah, that sort of fits. And it's called Dangerous Journey, and it stars Tom Baker, who was, of course, the fourth Doctor Who, or four, as you call him nowadays. And it's so there was some pretty big surprises, actually, with this. Well, one main surprise with this, which I'll get onto into a minute. But basically, the plot of this educational thing, Tom he's kind of like a variant on the Doctor in a way. He's like a magical computer game making person, and there's a kid who comes around and play tests his latest creations, and you can sort of tell that it's from the very late 80s, sort of verging on the 90s, because of the way the computer games are talked about, like the other computer games. There's like lots of references to slightly more sort of fantasy-based things like monsters. You get an impression of, he sort of paints this picture of huge graphical sprites throwing things at like monsters and things, which just feels a bit more sort of Commodore Amiga-ish. And indeed, there's what they're playing on looks a bit like maybe a PC or Amiga or ST, something along those lines. So this is clearly
beige box with a keyboard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the 16-bit era, right in the middle of it. And the twist in this new game is that Tom has made a game to protect kids from being mown down by idiots. But the playtester, he sort doesn't. It's in that classic sort of Doctor Who sort of thing of trying to guide somebody into it in a sort of introducing an element of danger and having to try and impart some kind of. It's sort of hard to explain a bit, but it's the thing about Tom Baker's performance here is that it's got a combination of sinisterness yet friendliness and avuncularity, and it's the precise sort of blend that made him famous in Doctor Who, which is of course why he's been chosen for this and this script in particular.
That, and he wasn't really doing anything much in 1989.
Yeah, well, yeah. And in other hands, if somebody else had been in the main role, it would have been quite corny, but his presence is just about abrasive enough and sly enough to stop that.
All very specifically Tom Baker traits.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if any, the character is a grown man who is apparently friends with a young boy, so this could have been quite dodgy in certain hands.
Yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't even occur to you with Tom.
No,
he's just Tom.
Yeah, as I say, he's got that blend of sinisterness and friendliness, and it's just that sort of he's out to do good, but he sort of presents it in a sort of a dangerous, of course, way, as in Dangerous Journey, and he's put this kid, this play tester, in charge of saving these other kids without explicitly telling him, as a way of informing himself, that which comes into play eventually at the very end. Yeah, so he's the game takes form in a kind of a it's almost like an FMV game of the kind that was about to become real, you know, in with the impending CD-ROM thing that was coming along in basically around about that point. And I mean around about that point you already had those Laserdisc games at the arcade, the like American Laserdiscs. Yeah, American
with the big orange gun.
Yes, exactly, and they'd be projected on like a front thing. They had one of those cabinets at Thorpe Park for ages, I seem to remember, because they had a little mini arcade there. And there's a it's not presented in a kind of a way that explicitly makes it look like a video game. Like they've not put like a mosaic effect to try and simulate pixels. But
it's just straight up footage, just straight up video footage.
Yes.
Of kids walking to school.
Yeah, and the way he sort of, I think there's some mention of it says, "Oh, why are the graphics so boring?" And he keeps making a thing of, "Oh, they're not like green bug-eyed monsters shooting lava out their mouths at you and all this business." Yeah, but you'd think that even through, you know, it was getting onto the era of FMV, like the nearest thing you could get to. Well, FMV would be like a postage stamp thing of about like 256 colours and all grainy and flickery and all that.
Yeah.
But
this is remarkably good resolution for 1989.
Yes. So yeah, because like if this had been produced in the early 80s, it would focus more around like some sort of stereotypically Space Invaders kind of thing, like. They'd have like cell animation to mock up like a video game, like the beginning of Terrorhawks, or something like there's this one public information film which emulates a sort of a Space Invaders kind of game, like a side scroller, and it's done with sort of glowing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the name.
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I think it's called Space Invader, isn't it?
It might very well be. Yeah. But yeah, so basically the plot goes on, and I think there's 3 groups of kids. Well, technically I think there's 2 kids. One's on a bicycle, one is some other kid, and there's 2 schoolgirls, and they're all making their way to school. And basically, like an FMV game, he has to like Tom has to sort of nudge him and say, "You've got to." Charlie is the name of the boys who playtest the boy. Says, "Look out, Charlie," and he has to like press like a left key or right key or some sort of key that's mapped to pause or something and rewind. And actually, funny enough, when at those pause points, it sort of acts a bit like a VCR, more like a thing. I think at one point there's pause and rewind and things. The kid on the bicycle, he presses rewind and it sort of goes backwards, and then they literally reverse the footage at that point and then play it back again. And at no point, actually the whole thing really, Charlie ever realizes that it's an actual real life situation. He sort of ends up subconsciously taking on the lesson when he just about nearly gets run over himself, but sort of saves himself at the last moment. So
yeah, right at the end.
Yeah. And just before I get on to the next bit, I will mention there's an interesting quirk of the script, is that at one point Tom and Charlie are sort of arguing over, I can't remember, like something to do with food, and like there's a very deliberate focus on vegetable samosas. I seem to remember. Yeah. It's just like, it says vegetable samosa. You hate vegetable samosa. He sort of says it in a way, and then at the very end, just after Charlie manages to save himself, he thinks, I think I'll have a piece of cake. No, a vegetable samosa, and then he bursts out laughing in that way. He does. Yeah. So there's so one of the fascinating things about this for me was that when I was watching this, I started to realize, I was thinking, okay, hang on, some of this places look familiar, and I was wondering why it looked. Not everything looked familiar, but there were like certain locations seemed to like ring a bell in my head, and then at one point, one of the school kids, I suppose I don't want to reveal the precise bit of it because it's the 21st century and we're on the internet, but basically one of the locations I suddenly realized, and I was astounded when I read it, because I had to like pause the video and sort of keep checking the shots because it's everything's edited quite quickly in these sections. I realized that one of the locations was literally filmed just down the road from me. Yeah, I was just astounded, and I realized why at the end, because at the there's very little credits, but it gives thanks to Cobham Bike Hire, which is a bit out of the way from me, but it's near enough to achieve that for the scene. And I think there's another location which is used, which I'm familiar with as well. So it's funny that it was just this strange little startling thing just to see somewhere which I've been down countless times in my life, like a road I've been down countless times in my life, just suddenly cropping up as this location.
It's one of those coincidences that the universe throws up every so often just to keep you on your toes.
Yeah, but that was quite extraordinary. One other thing, actually, I will mention. There was it's kind of going a bit off topic, but it involves Tom still. Did you ever read that thing? It's advertised as a book, as like a full novel, but it's more like a sort of a short story spaced out with lots of illustrations. But it's a kid's book that Tom Baker wrote called The Boy Who Kicked Pigs.
No, I've heard of it. I've seen bits of it, but I never actually read it, no.
That is
Are you sure it's a kid's book? Because I've never been able to figure out whether it is or not.
He wrote it intending to be a kid's book, but I get the impression that the publisher didn't want to publish it as a kid's book because there's a lot of like death and mayhem in it. There's it ends up with this endless scene of carnage basically, and there's lots of angry asides about the state of the media and news media and things, which sort of doesn't quite jibe with that. But for some reason I just sort of that it just reminded me of this for some reason. I not that there's anything like that in here, but I just I just remember that for some reason. So would I recommend this? I definitely would. I would definitely recommend this. It's not
like roads have fundamentally changed since 1989, so it's still relevant.
Yeah. Aside from the obvious, road safety things, which also points out actually quite well that adults are sometimes as stupid as the kids sometimes. I like that section of it where some blokes fiddling about with a radio and somebody else is like talking to each other. So I like that bit. But it's worth watching just as a fascinating little curio if you're familiar, of course, with Tom Baker and Doctor Who and anything like that.
I've got a couple of bits of trivia about it.
Oh yes, please.
The little kid is played by Neil Maskell, who grew up to play any number of switchblade, standing knife wielding cockneys in films like The Football Factory and Rise of the Foot Soldier, and can also be seen in the series Humans. And the other thing is, it's made by Crown Communications, who, if you saw my documentary Square Peg about BSB, that's the same Crown Communications that ended up doing their news coverage.
Oh yeah,
which gives you an idea of what kind of news coverage BSB ended up having. I've wanted to find this film on the internet for ages, actually. I'm really glad that I did, because I saw it twice when I was at primary school. We had to shuffle into the hall and sit down and watch it on an old Ferguson television. I was the only one who remembered that we'd seen it, but I was the only one that remembered the second time that we'd already seen it once.
Oh, literally everybody else forgot, including the class.
Well, nobody was paying attention, really.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we've come to the end of the podcast, and links to what we watched and can be seen in the description of both the YouTube and SoundCloud uploads. Podcast is still also available through Podomatic, I think.
I think so. I think we're starting to max out our space on that thing, actually.
Yeah. So we'll have to look into that, and I am going to have to sort out some kind of email address. I know I keep saying this at the end of every single podcast we do, but yeah, I'm gonna have to sort something out there. Yeah, and
Patton Oswalt always having a routine where he starting with, like, I want to lose some weight.
Yes,
It's just a tradition.
Yeah. Anyway, so this podcast came out quite later than usual, unfortunately, because endless technical problems, and also I had a weird turn at one point. But we will hopefully be back soon. At this point I don't want to say, like, give a precise date, because things keep cropping up. But we will be back reasonably shortly.
We'll see you when we see you.
Yeah, we'll see you when you see you. And so that will.
The next one will probably be a Christmas special.
Yes, yeah, that's probably an idea, actually. Yeah, so yeah. So until then, I am Chriddof.
And I am Applemask.
And see you later.